Check your Bibles, and I want you to turn to John chapter 14. We are going to conclude our series, The Master's Sign, that we have been doing for the last 8 weeks. And today, what I'm going to do is to bring all the thoughts that we have done so far, last 8 weeks, to summarize them for you to take away. If you have missed all the 8 weeks, you have a bumper offer today. You get to know everything that we have done in the entire series. All right, so I want you to turn to John chapter 14, verses 12. Verses 12 and 13. Truly I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do. Because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. If Jesus didn't say this, we would have called it heresy. How can somebody do greater things than Jesus himself? That's not possible. Jesus is God. We know that he is God. And Jesus did the things that he has done on the earth. And had Jesus not made that statement, if I did say that you can do greater things than Jesus, you would have called me a heretic. You would have thrown me out as a false prophet. But Jesus said that. It is Jesus who is now promising to every believer that if you believe, you will do greater things than the works that I have done on the earth. And that's what we have discussed last 8 weeks on the works of Jesus. John, writing this gospel, calls them the signs. He picks up out of 34 miracles, probably a little more. Out of those 34 miracles, John picked up 7 to show the authority of Jesus, to show who Jesus is. And each of them, as he arranged them in such a logical order, that as they progress, they get increasingly difficult by the time Jesus comes and stands in front of Lazarus' tomb. And each week, as we picked up those signs, we learned lessons out of those miracles that Jesus has done. So what I'm going to do today is to bring all those thoughts and try and arrange them for you in an order, from each miracle, a lesson or two, so that you can take them away and keep them stored up in your heart. Jesus, the 7 signs, each of them shows something unique about Jesus Christ. The first sign, when he turned the water into wine, Jesus proved himself to be the master of quality, the one who has control over elements, the winemaker. When he healed the official son from a distance, while he was in Capernaum, the official son traveled all the way from Cana and met Jesus. And when Jesus told him, "Go, your son will be healed," Jesus showed he's the master of the longitude and the latitude, that no distance can be that big that Jesus cannot do a miracle. In the third miracle, when Jesus went to the pool at Bethesda and made this lame man walk, Jesus showed that he is the time master, he's the clock master. He has control over the time. I know he is sick for 38 years. I know he has done everything that he can. But Jesus, by healing him, asking him to get up and walk, he showed that he is the master of time. It doesn't matter how long you are sick. It doesn't matter how long your situation has been like that and how tough it has become. Jesus can change it in a matter of seconds. Split seconds. That's what he showed when he asked the lame man to get up, take up his mat and walk. In the fourth miracle, when Jesus fed 5,000 people, technically 20,000 people, he gave them a banquet so much that they have leftovers. When they picked it up, 12 baskets of leftovers were there with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He showed that he is the Lord of quantity. Not only is the Lord of quality, but he's also Lord of quantity. No number is too big for God. So don't sit there and think the debt that I have, in order to pay back my debt, that money is too big. If you believe, Jesus can do that. No number is big for Jesus. That's what he proved to us when he took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed nearly 20,000 people. He is the one who created the algebra, the multiplication. Then when he moved from there and met this blind man, born blind, and healed him, Jesus showed he is the master of our body. He is the one who can rewire anything. There is nothing that Jesus cannot do in our body. There is no cancer that is so difficult for Jesus to heal. There is no disease and sickness in our bodies that Jesus cannot, with one touch, cannot heal. Anything is possible with Jesus. Any disease can be healed by Jesus. Then as he walked on the water, he showed that he is the master of all creation. He is truly the creator. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If you read for Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, Bible declares, Paul declares that for by him all things were created. Things that are visible, things that are invisible, whether rulers or powers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. So Jesus showed his mastery over the creation when he walked on the water. Of course, by walking on the water, he taught his disciples to believe in him, that it is possible. And by making Peter walk on the water, he said, not only I would walk, I can make you walk on the water. And last week we looked at how Jesus, when he raised up Lazarus from the tomb, he showed himself as the grave robber, the one who defeated the death. Not the one who cheated the death, but the one who defeated the death. Literally, Jesus defeated the death. And he can do that in your life, even now, if you believe. We saw how water molecules recognized its creator. We talked about how water blushed, when it saw its creator. How the longitude and latitude have come under his lordship. How this this master had created a new algebra equation. 5 plus 2 is equal to 5,000 R12. You remember that? The equation that I gave you? We saw amazing things as we journeyed through the last few weeks. So, I'm going to pick up one lesson from each of them, 1 or 2 lessons that you can remember with you. Maybe you should write them down. The first thing that I want to leave you with this today, as we looked at the works of Jesus, and I'll come back to the passage that we have read just now. That is my concluding thought. The first lesson that we can learn about Jesus and his miracles is this, that Jesus still wants to do miracles in your life. He didn't do miracles 2,000 years back. He wants to do them even now, even today with you. If you believe, he will do it. God still is interested in your life. He is still interested in every minute detail of your life. He still wants to change your life. He wants to do it. If you believe, he will do it. God is still interested in our life today, but you have to believe that he can do that miracle that you're looking for and seeking for. Keep that thought in your mind as we go dive into the first miracle and see what we take away from there. When we saw Jesus going into, in John chapter 2, when Jesus went into the wedding in Cana and found out that the wine is now over, and has he performed this miracle of 6 jars full of water, turning them into wine, Jesus taught a very important lesson. That is this, that God is great not just because he does great things. God is great because he cares about little things. Write it down. God is great not just because he does great things. God is great because he cares about little things in your life. If the wedding does not have wine, it doesn't really matter. They probably have to live with it all their life, the bride and the groom. People talking about how the food was over or the wine was over. But that's not really something that will destroy their life. That's not something that really needs a miracle. But that Jesus is interested in even that thing shows us that God is interested even in the little things of your life. He does care about your taking care of your little things in your life. He does care that you should not be put to shame. That your head should not bend down in front of others because you believed in Jesus. He will make sure that you would stand straight. He will not put you to shame. Remember that. Because he does care about little things. That's the first lesson that I learned from the winemaker. The one who taught me that he does care about little things in my life. He is interested in taking care of small things, things that may not be really big matters, but he does want to do something wonderful in my life, even in little things. We move from chapter 2 to chapter 4, where we see another miracle. When Jesus healed the official's son from a distance. There's another lesson that I want to teach you, not through the miracle, but the way that the official met Jesus. Out of that, I want to teach you the second principle that I've learned through this series, is this, that God is always setting you up to meet the right person at the right time. Listen, think about that. God is always setting you up to meet the right person at the right time to meet Jesus at a later stage when his son is sick. Now, I'll give you a counter perspective on the same point. For the official, he met the right person at the right time in Cana. But put yourself in Jesus' shoes now. So, the same principle applies to you sometimes. That God moves you from one place to the other place because you are the right person at the right time for somebody else. Remember that. Not only God will bring right people at the right time into your life to do a miracle, but sometimes God sets you up so that you can become the right person at the right time for somebody to have the right miracle in their lives. So God moves you from one job to the other. God moves you from one location to another location. God stops you from moving from one location to the other location. Even though you really want to go from Hyderabad to America, God stops you and says, wait. Because I'm setting you up to become the right person at the right time for somebody else. Am I making sense to you right now? That's the lesson that I've learned out of the miracle at Capernaum, the official son being healed. The third lesson that I want to teach you is from the third miracle. In John chapter 5, Jesus meets this guy who was there for 38 years, sitting at the colonnade, the pool of Bethesda, waiting for a miracle to happen in his life. In fact, I'm going to teach you two lessons out of this. The first lesson I want you to take away from this miracle is this. Our assumptions, for better or for worse, affect the outcomes in our life. Our assumptions, for better or for worse, decide the outcomes in our lives. Remember this. Most miracles happen to the people with the fewest assumptions. I'm using the word assumptions because I have another word for that. Let's call that superstitions. The reason why this guy is waiting at the colonnade is because he believed that an angel actually comes and stirs up the water, and whoever gets into the pond would get healed. It was a superstition that developed because of the springs that keep coming forth. To believe anything that is superstitious, we are prone to believe things that are actually false. Many of our beliefs are actually false, even including Christians. And because of our beliefs, we make assumptions in our lives that are not giving an opportunity for God to declare His glory. 38 years because of one false assumption. Well, there might be somebody who really did get healed. Of course, something would have happened in something like, to develop that kind of superstition. But 38 years just hanging on to something for water, to be stirred up and to be thrown into the water. What you and I need is to have one single assumption. One assumption. That's why I said most miracles happen to the people who have fewer assumptions. In fact, let's call it one assumption, that God is able to do anything. That God is able to do anything. Joshua believed it. In the middle of the war, he believed God is able to do anything. So he prays to God and says, God, would you stop the sun from moving from there? I'd like to finish my task today. Can you keep the sun up? And God did. Because Joshua believed that God can do this. If you believe, God will do something like that in your life. Sun can stand still in your life. But you've got to believe. Have one single assumption, that God is able to do anything. You see, that's why Peter could walk on the water. That's why Peter could ask the lame person in front of the temple called Beautiful, ask him to get up in the name of Jesus, because he believed that is possible. I cannot do this. I don't have money to give you, but I have something, the name of Jesus. I believe that by the name of Jesus you can walk. So in the name of Jesus, get up and walk. He did. That's why Elisha could throw an axe head onto the water and make it float. Have you ever tried that? Try a spoon, forget about axe head. Try to float it on the water. How is it possible? Because he believed anything is possible with God. Have few assumptions. The less assumptions that you have, and have one assumption that really matters, that with God, all things are possible. That's what Jesus taught to that guy. Just believe that I can do this, and you will see a miracle in your life. The second lesson that I want to leave you from the same story, John chapter 5, is what happened after the miracle took place. That the Pharisees couldn't digest the fact that Jesus healed a lame man on a Sabbath day. Hey, you're supposed to take rest on a Sabbath day. You're doing miracles, and Pharisees were really upset. We called it the inattentional blindness. You remember that? Sometimes you intentionally become blind to what is happening around you. Choose to be blind to what's happening around you. That's what's happening with Pharisees. They chose not to look at the miracle, but to look at the rules. So I taught you one important lesson out of that. That Jesus breaks rules to do a miracle for you. Jesus breaks rules to do a miracle for you. Write it down. That's a very important thing. It should make you happy, Now, Jesus doesn't break his rules. Jesus will break your rules. He will break natural rules to do a miracle for you. Don't get confused between his rules and your rules. Now, on the Sabbath day, God asked them to take rest. But you remember I told you how many other laws they wrote down? 372 laws, nearly, just on the Sabbath day. You remember the command where God asked, on the seventh day, God rested, you take rest. That's all God asked you to do, take rest. But these guys defined rest and wrote another sub-rules of almost 300 plus rules, which define what a person should do on a Sabbath day or not. And he broke all those rules. Jesus broke all those rules by healing this person. So God sometimes will break rules so that you can have a miracle. Remember this. The day our imagination dies, miracles stop happening in our lives. The day our imagination dies, miracles will stop happening in our lives. God is able to do more than what we ask for. Then Paul adds something else. And what we can imagine. If you stop imagining the power of God, you stop seeing the miracles of God. So start believing that your father can accept Jesus Christ. Start believing that your brother, irrespective of how far he went away from God, can come back. Because God can do that. Believe that even though your brother or your mother is at stage 4 cancer, God can still do it. Even on the day that person is about to take his last breath or her last breath, God can still heal and rise up. He can do that. If you stop imagining, you don't see miracles at all. See, that guy never imagined anything beyond the colonnade, anything beyond that pond, the Bethesda pool. He thought that's the only chance he's got to experience a miracle, and Jesus proved it otherwise. We have a predictably unpredictable God. You can expect God to be unpredictable. Expect God to break rules. Expect God to do things that are beyond your wildest imaginations. So from there we jump to the fourth miracle in chapter 6 of John. In chapter 6 of John, we saw how a little boy's faith, little boy's giving, has become a blessing to 20,000 people. 5 loaves and 2 fish he was willing to give. And Jesus used just the 5 loaves and 2 fish to arrange a great banquet for 20,000 people. Now remember this. 2 lessons out of that again, out of that. The first one is this. Miracles require for us to give away what we love the most. Miracles require for us to give away what we love the most. I'll make it a little more difficult. Miracles requires for us to give away what we need most. That would make it difficult, isn't it? I'll make it a little more. Miracles require for us to give away what we yet not have. We still don't have it, but sometimes God asks us to give that up so that He can use that to do a miracle, not only in your life and through your life for somebody else. But here is the lesson that I want you to remember. God cannot give back what you don't give Him. We always want Him to give to us, right? But we don't want to give to Him. God cannot give you back what you don't give it to Him. If you didn't give anything to God, don't expect from Him anything. This little boy needed that 5 loaves and 2 fish. That was his mother who prepared that tiffin box for him. It was his food. He's supposed to eat. But he was ready to give away what he has, what he needs the most, and Jesus takes that. Not only He feeds the little boy, but He also feeds everybody else around him, just because of 5 loaves and 2 fish that the little boy gave. So choose to give to God. Then He will give you back. That's a lesson that I've learned. Another lesson that I've learned out of this miracle, the 5 loaves and 2 fish, the feeding of this 5,000, is this. Miracles don't happen when we believe, don't just happen when we believe God for big things. They happen when we obey God in little things. Listen to that one more time. Miracles don't just happen when we believe God for big things. We are very good at believing God for big things. God can do this. God can do this. God can change our country. I don't know how many times we said that. We can believe God for big things, and it is good. Miracles don't happen just because you believed God for big things. Miracles happen when you obey God in little things. Little things, small things, one day at a time. When you start doing that, then God can use your life, God can use what you're doing to do great things that you're actually believing in. The reason that miracle, the miracle of 5 loaves and 2 fish, was possible is because this little one chose to show a little obedience by choosing to give. And Jesus used it. So is there any area in your life where you're not ready to obey? God is asking you to obey. Just do this. One little thing. And I can do a greater thing for you. But you're not willing to do that. You're not willing to give away what you think you need the most. You're still holding on to it. You're still saying, no, I need this. I don't think I can do this. Maybe God is saying, just once, try doing that. Give your 5 loaves and 2 fish. I can show you what I can do in and through your life. So think about that. Is there anything that you're still holding on that is keeping you from obeying what God is asking you? In the same chapter, we see the next miracle. Jesus fed 5,000, and then something happened on that night. Jesus walked on the water. Remember, he sent the disciples after this miracle of feeding 20,000 people or 5,000 people, whatever you want to call it. People started flocking in because they never seen something like that. They have never heard something like this is possible. And too many people. Jesus needed time for himself to pray. And so he told his disciples, push them to get into a boat. Then he went to pray. In the middle of the night, when these guys caught, almost at 2 o'clock in the morning, probably, or 3 o'clock in the morning, they were caught in the storm in the Sea of Galilee. Jesus saw them. Bible says, Jesus saw them from the mountain. How is it possible? Have you ever tried? Do you know your vision cannot go beyond, on a very clear day, it cannot go more than 5 miles. If you're really on a good height. Can't see more than that clearly. But Jesus saw them in the middle of the water, struggling, straining at the oars. That's what Bible says. They gave up. They're exhausted. They want to live, so they're straining at the oars to keep the boat floating. And Jesus began to walk on the water. Just that one word, Jesus saw, is something that I want you to remember. God sees everything in your life. He's now looking into your heart. He's now looking into your thoughts. He's looking into your situation at home. He's looking into your finances. God sees everything. You remember Abraham's wife Hagar, not Sarah. Hagar, when Sarah, after Isaac was born, she didn't like this servant maid, the Egyptian lady, and she didn't want Ishmael to be there because she was worried Ishmael would take all the inheritance from Abraham. And so she wanted them to leave. Bible says when Hagar couldn't see how her son Ishmael is suffering, she kept him under a bush and walked away from him because she didn't want to see him dying. And as she kept herself far away and she's crying for her baby, God, Bible uses this brilliant word, God saw her and speaks to her and tells her, I saw what's happening to you. I saw you and your son, and I'm going to bless him. So if he cares about a son who he did not promise, imagine how much He will care about you and me. Because we are His children. He sees us, everything that we're going through. And so He will walk on the water to meet you. But this is the lesson that I want to give away out of the water walking. God has absolute control over everything except you. God has absolute control over everything except you. He cannot control you. I'm not doing a heresy here, don't worry. I'm going to show that to you. God can make the storm to quiet down. God can take a blind man and rewire his eyes so that he can see. God can rise up a dead person who is dead for 4 days and is buried, is stinking now, make him rearrange his body and bring him back to life. God can do all that. He can turn water into wine without the presence of a grape. He can stand up and heal somebody's son from almost 27 miles away. He can do that. God can do all that except controlling you. Because He created you with a free will. He chose to give you a free will. You can sit there, listen to God, experience all the miracles around you, and still choose not to believe. You can look at the cross every single day and know what Christ is doing on the cross and still choose to spit on Him and walk away. You can do that. You have absolute control over your life. God doesn't have that control. Till you say, I have control over my life. Till the day you surrender yourself completely, God cannot take control of your life. Isn't it funny? The one who created you with all His traits can control everything in the world except you. So I told you, I'm reiterating that you can come every single Sunday to the church because you're born Christian and you don't have a choice but to go to church. You can give your tithes because you think at least by giving that I'll get my money back. Whatever. You can do all the things that are associated with Christianity because you think that's the right thing to do and still choose not to believe in Jesus. Not to believe in a miracle. But that's your choice. He can't have control over you for that. But when you, like Peter, say, I believe, I want to believe, can I walk on the water? He will then tell you, yeah, come on out. But that's your choice. So listen to me for the next 3 hours, next 20 years as your pastor, and still, you can still be an unchanged person. Absolutely. That's your choice. Even God cannot do anything in your life if you are not choosing to change. God has absolute control over everything except you. That's one lesson I want you to remember through this amazing miracle of Jesus walking on the water. Just from the walk that Peter took. You remember I gave you one principle on faith. Okay, if you didn't hear that on that day, listen to this and write it down, okay? Faith is climbing out on the limb and cutting the branch that you're sitting in. Then watch the tree fall. That is faith. One more time. Faith is getting onto the tree, to the tip of the branch, that is the limb. Then start to cut. You remember Nasiruddin, I don't know, I forgot his name. Nasiruddin Hudza. Cut the tree, cut the branch on which you're sitting. Then watch the tree fall, not your branch. That's faith. That's what happened to Peter when he walked on the water. It's not possible by any stretch of your imagination. That's not possible for a human being to walk on the water. But he did. Because he chose to cut the branch on which he was sitting. Then he saw the tree fall. From there, we move on to chapter 9. Jesus does a miracle of healing the blind man, in which he declares himself as the light of the world. I talked about how difficult it is for a child to have a 20/20 vision if the 20/20 vision did not develop in the first 18 months. You remember that? If you put an eye patch on one eye for a child after he or she is born and keep it there for the next 18 months, the child would permanently be blind in one eye, even though she has or he has a perfect eye. So whatever develops, it happens in the first 18 months of a child after she or he is born. So if something did not take place there, the brain and the nerve, the system did not arrange itself well, wire itself well, things could go wrong. Really wrong. So what we call that situation is irreversible. You cannot do anything about it. Now, the window of opportunity is closed now for the child. I don't know for what reason this boy was born blind. Jesus does give an explanation of why that boy is born blind. But what that little boy, as he grew up and now became a man and a beggar, is experiencing what is irreversible in his life. Sometimes we lose opportunities like that, which will never come back. We regret them. We look back and see, oh my God, how did I make a mistake? How did I not take that opportunity? The opportunity is gone now, forever, irreversible. There are some things in our lives that are irreversible. Once you do them, you have done them. That's it. You can never get them back. Maybe some of you have that situation right now, today. You know you cannot reverse it back. You cannot rewind things back. Irreversible. Sometimes it happens because of our foolishness. Sometimes it happens because of somebody else's foolishness. But things become now irreversible. By rewiring his eyes, a born blind who cannot see with both of his eyes, he actually rewired him. His retina and the visual cortex, he reconnected them. What Jesus did by putting the mud on his eyes, that is made with saliva, of course, as he put them on his eyes, he did a rewiring of his eyes to his visual cortex. What happens in 18 months span, Jesus did in seconds. Just rewired them. So, here is the principle. Never say never to God. It's not a Bond movie. Never say never to God. God, I don't think it's possible. Have you ever tried saying that to God? I told that many times. I don't think it's possible, God, kind of statements. And God must be laughing when we say that, Really? Did you just say that to me? Never say never to God. Remember that. That's the principle I learned out of that. I can never tell God what he cannot do. So that is really foolishness, to say that to God. I don't think God can change my wife. I don't think God can change my son. I don't think God can change my situation. I don't think God can do anything about my company. Please don't do that. Don't do that. There is nothing irreversible in God's dictionary. Okay, remember that. There's nothing irreversible. And there's no word like that in the dictionary of God. So even if you missed your window of opportunity, it's never too late or too little. God can change any situation. Another important lesson that you learn from the healing of the blind person is this, that we don't experience the world as it is, we experience it as we are. You remember I taught you that principle? We don't experience the world as it is, as we see the world. We don't experience the world like that. We experience the world, we perceive the world as we see as we are inside. Not as we see it, but as we are. If you are dark inside, if you have sin in your heart, if you have darkness ruling your heart, your mind, and your thoughts, you see the world as dark. You see the people around you as dark people. You see the people around you as evil people, if you are an evil person. But if you dealt with your sin inside your heart, if you allowed the light of the world to shine in your heart, then you see the world in the light of God. Then you see the people in the light of God. Everybody looks good then, because God looks at everybody and sees them through the eyes of Jesus Christ. You get the idea now why God does give opportunities to evil people still? That even though he's a wicked person, God doesn't kill him quickly. In fact, it looks as if God is blessing that person. And you feel really angry with God. Habakkuk asked the same question. If you go back and read Habakkuk, chapter 1, he asked 7 questions to God. All to do with injustice and unrighteousness in the world. He's asking God, why are good people always suffering? Then he says, why are evil people prospering? Good people anyway, you're not caring. Why are evil people growing? Why don't you punish them? It looks as if the good people are suffering more than the evil people. He had those questions, the questions that you have in your mind right now, same questions. Then God gave him an answer. Go back and read it. I don't want to teach that. Some assignment, no, for you. God answers them throughout the Habakkuk. By the time you finish the book, come to the end of the book, Habakkuk bursts into praise. He had questions in the beginning, but then he bursts into praise, saying, God, and I see the wisdom that is in you. But the reason why God does is because God sees the world from a very different perspective than yours. But if you have light of Christ inside you, you begin to see the people around you, the world around you, from the eyes of God. And then everything becomes a miracle to you. So remember that. That's why the Pharisees couldn't digest the fact that Jesus healed a person who's born blind. Because they chose not to look at Jesus, not to look at the blind man from the eyes of God. Then we move on to the last one that we looked at last week. There are many lessons we learned out of how Jesus robbed the grave as he brought Lazarus out of the tomb. But just 2 lessons. Number 1. The will of God is always the glory of God. I kept repeating it for the last 5 weeks, and I'm going to repeat it one more time. The will of God is always the glory of God. In every area of your life, God's will is that God gets the glory, not you. God's will is that the Father may be glorified. Not you becoming the famous, not your business running well, not your finances being well, not your promotions. All that will add. But that's not the end goal. End goal is by promoting you, God gets the glory. End goal is that by taking you from Potiphar's house and placing you into Pharaoh's house, by doing that, God gets the glory, not Joseph. Remember the process, Joseph learned, hey, it's not about me. It's all about Jesus. It's all about God. So whatever God does in your life, he wants to get glory for himself. You call him selfish, whatever you want to call him, but that's how God is. You can never call God selfish, you know that, right? You cannot. That's not possible to define him like that. He deserves it. He deserves his glory. That he, at least giving you an opportunity to breathe itself is a great thing. Forget about the promotions and businesses flourishing and all that stuff. That God is allowing you and me to breathe every single moment itself is a big thing for us. So God's will Remember this. God's will always is God's glory. That's what Jesus said about the blind man. That's why Jesus delayed going to Lazarus' tomb, to the rescue of Lazarus. He heard it, that Lazarus is sick, but he delays 2 more days. And by the time he reaches, Lazarus is dead, buried for 4 days. But at the end, Jesus prays an amazing prayer to Father. Father, I know that every time I pray, you hear me. Have you ever prayed that prayer? Ever tried that? We don't do that. Do you know that? We don't have that much confidence. God, every time I pray, you hear, and I know you're going to hear it right now. That takes a lot of faith, And he says, but for the sake of the people who are here, do this. Not that I don't believe in you. I know that if I ask you, you will do it. But for the sake of people who are watching right now, bring Lazarus out of the tomb. And God does that. God's will is always God's glory. Remember that. As we saw throughout these 7 weeks, we see some amazing lessons that we have learned. Let me conclude with one question that Jesus posed in front of Martha in John chapter 11. As he spoke to Martha, Jesus asked her, in verses 26, Jesus asked her, do you believe? So it all boggles down, comes back to one single question, always. No matter how big the miracle you're expecting, how small the miracle you're expecting, doesn't matter. How big the need is, how small the need is, doesn't matter. It's always one single question. Do you believe? Do you believe? But she already declared her faith. You remember the verse before, she said, I'm glad you are here. I know that now, even now, God will listen to whatever you ask him. She already declared her faith, but yet Jesus asks her, do you really believe? That's the question God poses in front of you right now. Do you believe? I mean, really believe. Because if you want to do greater works than him, you got to believe first. Go back to that passage one more time in chapter 14, verses 12. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. Not only the works that I do, but even greater things than I did. You know, we are always at the end of the verse. We are always looking at that verse and pumping ourselves. We'll do greater things than God. But that's not possible unless you say that. But do you believe? You're saying that because I'm asking you to repeat. But do you actually believe? For your situation right now, for your visa right now, for your office, for your business, for your relationship for that matter. Do you really believe that God can do that? What if right now Jesus is standing in front of you, right here, opposite to your chair, and he's looking at you, hey, I can bring your Lazarus out. I can do that. It's not impossible for me. I can resurrect. I know it's dead and buried, but I'm going to do that. But do you actually believe it? What would your answer be? The reason you don't see miracles today is because you don't actually believe. You say you believe, but you don't believe in your heart. You're always thinking of plan B. Have you realized that? We ask God for one thing, but we're always planning, if God doesn't do, then let me do this. You may not say that out loud, but that's what you do. All the time. Including me. There's no plan. There should not be a plan B in a Christian's dictionary. It's always plan A. God is able to do anything and everything that I ask him to do. You remember Joshua, as he stood there, asked God, God, stop the sun. I'm sure Joshua didn't see God literally in the sense that you are seeing me like. But he believed that God is listening to him. And he said, God, can you stop the sun because I want to win this war? And then thought about a different strategy. okay, if God doesn't do that, how do I kill these fellows? Should I postpone it to tomorrow morning? No. Isn't it? So if you really want to experience a miracle in your life, regarding any aspect of your life, anything that you're praying for, you must believe. All things are possible for those who believe. That's as simple as, I don't know how many times God has to tell you the same thing all over again, again and again, and again and again. Just believe. Now you could be in the situation like the father, the father who brought his son who is demon possessed. He wanted his son to be healed. Jesus asked him, do you believe? Father says something beautiful. At least he's honest. Maybe you should do that today. He says, I want to believe. He didn't say, I do believe. He says, I want to believe. Help me to believe. Maybe that's what you should do today. Right now, at this moment, that's what you should do. I want to believe God. I am not able to do that. Help me to believe. Do you think it's possible? Can you do that at least? Can you do that? Yes? No? Make a choice. I told you, at the end of the day, God does not have a control over your choice. So make a choice, saying, God, I want to believe. Help me to believe. Would you bow your heads? Think through this, okay? Whatever you heard throughout the 8 weeks, and this is the 9th week, each week, the bottom line is always the same lesson. Believe, and a miracle is possible. Believe, and a miracle is possible. Obey, and a miracle is possible. So irrespective of the size of your problem, size of your miracle that you're requiring, asking God, all you need to do is believe completely, 100%, for a miracle to happen. If it's not happening, ask God to help you to believe in it. Just take a moment to pray for yourself. Ask that out loud, open your mouth, ask that out loud. Tell Him, I want to believe God. I'm not able to, but I want to believe. Help me to believe.